Yeah. So good evening, everyone. I'm going to call our meeting to order, the regular American Canyon Fire Protection District Board meeting for April 22nd, 2025. Can you please join me in our Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Madam Clerk, can you do a roll call, please?
Board Member
Here.
Board Member Melissa Lamatima is excused. Board Member David Orrell,
Here.
Vice Chair Mark Joseph,
Here.
and Chair Pierre Washington.
Here. Can we get a report on closed session, Mr. Ross?
Chair, Vice Chair, members of the board, members of the public, board convened in open session at 6 p.m. after ascertaining no comments on matter agendized for closed session, adjourned to closed session. You concluded at 6:24. I'll do a written report consistent with the provisions of Government Code Section 5497.1B. That would conclude the report unless there are questions.
Any questions from the board? Seeing none, thank you, Mr. Ross. Proclamations and presentations. Tonight, we have no proclamations or presentations. Public comment. At this time, I'd like to open for public comment for any items that are not on our agenda. Any public comment? No? Anything online?
No, Chair.
Agenda changes. Are there any agenda changes on the board? We have two.
If there are no changes, I'll make a motion. We approve the consent calendar.
Second.
We have a second. Can we get a roll call, please?
Board Member Cruz,
Yes.
Board Member Orrell,
Yes.
Vice Chair Joseph,
Yes.
Chair Washington.
Yes. Moving on to public hearing. We have one item, item number 4, fire hazard severity zone map. Chief.
Good afternoon, Chair and members of the board. I'm here to discuss the recent changes of the fire severity hazard zone mapping that was done by the governor's or the state office of state fire marshal. It was essentially extending fire severity zones to the local response areas. So the areas where local fire agencies have the financial and legislative responsibility for fire suppression. The fire severity zones have been throughout the state for several years, I think probably a couple decades, in predominantly SRA areas of the state. So in Napa County, if you think of the county's topographic layout, essentially everything off the valley floor is considered state responsibility area, where CAL FIRE is legislatively responsible for fire suppression, prevention, and the financial costs of suppressing wildland fires. Typically, all the valley areas, incorporated cities, are considered LRA, or local response areas. This extension of the fire severity hazard zones to the LRA was legislatively enacted several years ago pursuant to the California Government Code Section 51178 and 5179. We were notified, I think about last year, that the state would be developing the fire severity hazard zones for the LRA. However, that's where it ended. It was a notification. This was all done through the office of the state fire marshal due to legislative actions. February 24th of this year, the maps were pertaining to American Canyon Fire Protection District in Napa County were released. As part of the government code, we had a obligation to post those maps within 30 days of receipt, which we did through our website and through social media, directing the public to our website if they had questions regarding the maps. Furthermore, the district is obligated to, within 120 days of receipt of the maps, to pass a local ordinance adopting these fire severity zones. There are some nuances to the fire severity zones, is that the local entities, so in this case, the American Canyon Fire Protection District, we could only expand the zone designations, i.e. increase the fire severity, hazard severity based off substantial evidence. The district could not reduce the fire severity level identified by the state fire marshal. And then, as I talked about, the timeframes for public noticing, adoption of an ordinance, as well as transmission back to the State Board of Forestry that the ordinance has been adopted. So to help walk through what this actually means for us, we're using the PowerPoint presentation that was developed by the Office of the State Fire Marshal to help explain the rationale behind the fire severity zone. So if you go to the first slide. So we've talked about why we are here, what the legislative actions were that necessitated the change. So the fire severity zones are broken down to 3 levels: moderate, high, and very high. So moderate is the least of the 3, and then very high is the most restrictive, or what they determine to have the most hazard potential. Next slide, please. So the zones are determined by CAL FIRE using what they describe as the best available science and data to develop. The model is evaluated on the probability of the area burning and potential fire behavior within the area. So there's an important distinction here that the State Fire Marshal says is these fire severity zones are classifying the hazard for wildland fire in these specific areas, but not the risk. So when we take into consideration what the hazard is, the factors that they used are the fire history, vegetation type, the expected flame length, the expected ember production, the proximity to existing wildlands or existing state responsibility area fire severity zones, the terrain, and the weather. So when they use the weather and fire behavior, they actually use weather data that they've collected over a period of years, and these fire severity zones are based on the worst possible weather scenario, not the typical average weather scenario. So think worst case scenario, and that is one of the metrics they use to develop these fire severity zones. Next slide, please. So they talk about the updated burn probabilities. They did include the areas that were burnt within the 2020 fires, which was a significant wildland fire year, especially here in Napa County, where we saw both the LNU complex and the glass fire. They updated the fire environment, in other words, urban developed versus wildland, the vegetation density for the urban areas, and inclusion of the slope into the urban modeling area. Localized weather used in both wildland and urban models, as well as the firebrand production and transport model using the wind distribution. Now, the other part of this that they talk about is this is not a measurement of potential ignition of structure to structure fire propagation. This is essentially what they're taking is what they refer to as a 50-year snapshot of the area, absent of what they call short-term fuel modification. So in other words, urban development, vegetation management practices, shaded fuel breaks, things like that. They don't take those into consideration in the hazard mapping because there's an echo here, I'm sorry.
There is, yeah.
They refer to those as short-term modifications to the fire environment. Next slide, please. So, talks a little bit more about wildland versus non-wildland zones. Zones are areas relatively homogeneous to slope and vegetation. They're produced at a 3-meter resolution, which I'm told is a very fine resolution. The scores are averaged within the zone, and the wildland is scored independently of urban and agricultural, and then urban zones are scored using additional model steps. Next slide, please. So one of the things when we look at the non-developed areas or the wildland areas, they broke the zones no smaller than 200 acres. They used the probability of fire occurrence from 1991 to 2020. And then as I talked about earlier, they used vegetation, slope, and then the local weather factors. Next slide. A little bit different here in the urban area, which is predominantly American Canyon's Fire Protection District, is they broke the zones down into zones no smaller than 20 acres. So still in the context of an urban environment such as American Canyon, that is still a pretty sizable zone, but obviously it is substantially less than 200 acres. They used the model was based on the distance to wildland and the hazard level of adjacent wildlands. So as we get to the next couple slides, we'll show that some areas on the eastern side of American Canyon are moderate into the city because that was the adjacent fire severity zone in the unincorporated or the state responsibility area. They talk about ember production, transport, and then the width of the moderate, high, and very high bands in the urban area are based off the ember load, urban tree cover, and slope. Next slide, please. So really, what are the maps used for? And this is somewhat of an interesting nuance because the way the legislation was written is the agency having fire protection responsibilities was required for the implementation and adoption of the ordinance. But in all reality, the fire severity zone maps are less of a fire suppression tool as they are more of a planning document for the agency that has land use jurisdiction. So one of the things they talk about here is the implementation of a more stringent building code. It's called Chapter 7A of the California Building Code. And that will be applicable to areas of high and very high fire severity zones, not moderate. You can look at also some of what the maps can be used for is for property development standards such as road widths, water supply, and signage. Again, that is more of a local land use authority realm than it is a fire protection suppression realm. Defensible space requirements, and then natural hazard real estate disclosure, which will be discussed in one of the subsequent slides. So I'm going to pause while we wait for the next slide. And are there any questions at this point from the board that I could potentially help answer while we're queuing up the next slide?
Any questions?
Okay. Thank
Seeing
you.
none,
Okay.
I think you're explaining it perfectly.
Perfect timing. So this illustrates really where the some of the potential impacts to from the various zones. So on the left hand in the green, you will see the requirements for the SRA, which are pretty stringent for the very high. I'm not going to focus on the very high for the local response area because fortunately American Canyon does not have any very high severity zones. We'll focus on the high fire severity zone. As you can see on the green side, there are still significant impacts within the SRA. However, those impacts are substantially less for the local response area. So one of them being adoption of the fire severity hazard zone maps. And then in the high areas, the implementation of Chapter 7A of the California Building Code for new development. And then you'll see the hazard disclosure, which is really part of the real property transactions as people buy and sell properties. It's really no different than disclosure if you're in a flood zone or not. You can see on the moderate, there are very little impacts other than the adoption of the fire severity zones. Next slide, please. So obviously, we talked about what the district's obligated to do through the legislative action of the government code. I will share that there are a couple other nuances. So the fire severity zones that were, if you can go to the next slide, I'd like to illustrate. So this is the fire severity zones for American Canyon. You can see the darker hash marked lines are essentially the border of the city of American Canyon, which are very close to the fire protection district's boundaries. The area that did receive the high is really because of, in my opinion, because of the topography of Oat Hill and Cookie Hill, because they are the two hills within American Canyon. And again, because they couldn't go below 20 acres, that's why you see the swath there. And then you can see that there is some moderate near the airport, as well as some of the areas adjacent to the Watson Ranch area and Newell Open Space. Now, what I was going to mention is one of the nuances of the way the maps that were created by the state is these maps and these zones are irrespective of parcel lines. So in other words, there could be, and we're reasonably fortunate because most of the parcels within the city and the district are reasonably small, but like portions of unincorporated Napa County, the larger land tracts, they can actually have all three fire severity zones transecting through the same parcel. So one of the discussions with the fire chiefs in the county was, there was a lot of conversation of, should all of the agencies take these maps and re-snap them to follow the parcel lines, or should we leave them as they were originally developed by the state? And collectively, we all decided that it is best to leave it by what was drawn up by the state versus trying to snap individual parcel lines. And really one of the drivers for that is the county of Napa their planning department has already been dealing with fire severity zones for decades. And it's very easy for them when an applicant comes in and says, I want to develop on parcel A, they can tell, because it's really, when that development side comes out, it's more of a planning building. They can work with the constituent and say, okay, well, if you want to build on this portion of your parcel, you're in a very high fire severity zone, these building codes apply. If you have the ability to build in another portion of the parcel where it is moderate, then these building codes apply. It is now the individual applicant's decision on which section of their parcel they would like to build on. So collectively, we all felt that re-snapping all these zones to match the parcel lines may be work that was really unnecessary and may not always be as conducive to the constituent that owns the property being able to use their property to their full maximum potential. So at this point, before you, I believe we'll have to open a public hearing, but there is an adoption that is based off CAL FIRE's model ordinance for adoption before you tonight, accepting the fire severity zones as developed by the Office of the State Fire Marshal. With that, happy to answer any questions or wait until after any further discussion.
Okay. Board Member Oral.
Yeah, just a quick question. So how do they survey this? Are they sending out anybody physically? I can't imagine them doing this for the whole state. I would imagine there's some GIS information and spatial stuff. Do you have any idea how they conducted the survey?
I don't, but because they were tasked with surveying the entire state, my gut is they didn't necessarily send someone out to each individual site. They used technology, satellite, LiDAR, other technological methods in which to survey the vegetation and so forth. And then obviously the weather data, that is probably weather data that was readily available from the National Weather Service.
Let me re-ask that question in maybe a more direct way. Did you play a part, did this fire district play a part in it anyway?
No, the fire district did not play a part in
Okay.
it and was not part of the process.
Thank you.
Vice Chair Joseph?
Yes, just a semantical thing, and I realize we don't have any say over it, but it might have been better to have low, moderate, and high as the three categories, because if you're in a high category, you assume that's a problem, and not realizing that, no, there's a very high. So for what it's worth, that's my biggest comment. And I talked earlier about the impact on your fire insurance, if you could talk
Yeah.
about that.
No, I appreciate you bringing it up because that is one of the questions that does routinely come up, especially in light of the state's current insurance situation. So on the state fire marshal's website, what they refer to as the landing page for the fire severity zones, there's a letter from the state insurance commissioner, Commissioner Lara, stating that the fire severity zones would have no impact on insurance because they are a hazard classification or zoning, not a risk classification, and that the insurance companies have their own risk models that they use for determining fire insurance. I think all of us will have our own opinions on that, but I can only go with what was presented by the state's insurance commissioner on the CAL FIRE Office of State Fire Marshal's website.
Thank you.
Any other questions? No more questions from the board. I'd like to open up the public comment for item number 4, if any. Can you answer your question? And I'm assuming nothing online?
No.
Okay. I'd like to close public comment on item number 4 and return to the board for any additional statements, questions, or making a motion on that ordinance number 2025-1.
If there are no comments or further questions, I move that we adopt ordinance number 2025-01, an ordinance of the American Canyon Fire Protection District adopting the 2025 Fire Hazard Severity Zone Map as recommended by the California State Fire Marshal.
I'll second.
Do we have a second? Can we get a roll call, please?
Board Member Cruz?
Yes.
Board Member Oro?
Yes.
Vice Chair Joseph?
Yes.
And Chair Washington?
Yes. Business items. Number 5, fighting fires with funding. Chief.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So as many of you know, I'm very actively involved with the Fire District Association of California, and this has been a several-year process where the Fire Districts Association of California firmly believes, and we see the reality of it here in American Canyon, is there's been a series for several decades at the Sacramento level that have impacted the funding abilities of fire districts. We can go all the way back to Prop 13, which capped property taxes to 2% a year increase, which is the board members here know, property taxes are our main source of revenue for a fire protection district. We have other state legislative decisions that where funding for fire protection districts have become an unintended consequence, I would frame it as. I think one of the ones that we can illustrate here in American Canyon is the state's effort for affordable housing. Many of those affordable housing projects are, or developments, I should say, are property tax exempt for up to 55 years. So we see increased services with increased population, but we don't have a revenue source commiserate with the increase in our service demand. We can go as far back as ERAF. I know ERAF is kind of a topic as well, especially last year when the state was threatening to potentially take ERAF away. ERAF is for most fire districts in California can be a 10% right off the top of property tax revenue that goes into
Can you remind us what ERAF is?
the education realignment.
Educational
augmentation
Revenue Augmentation Fund.
revenue. Yes, thank you. We can go as further as Cal OSHA's recent requirements that all personal protective gear for our firefighters are only useful, can only be used from 10 years from date of manufacture. Traditionally, before OSHA came out with that regulation, here at American Canyon, we would take our firefighter structural gear, we would get them tested every year to ensure that they were still operating appropriately. But we could project those lifespans much further out than, say, 10 years. And when you have a small organization like we do, a set of turnouts is $4,000 to $7,000. We need to have 2 sets for each individual. So if they go to a fire, or get the turnouts contaminated with blood or something, we can wash them, dry them, and they have another set because they don't have the luxury of saying, well, we can't go to the call because our turnouts are drying. But that's another $80,000 to $100,000 hit to our budget. And the list goes on and on. Prop 218, the raising the mark for tax measures to 3/4 versus 50% plus 1. So we worked through and developed this white paper. We titled it Fighting Fire with Funding. We developed some asks. Our biggest ask was several $100 million from the state, continuous, ongoing, that through our calculations would provide funding for fire districts to recruit, train, equip, and hire 600 to 700 additional firefighters in the state of California. So when you think of that in context like the Eaton Fire, the Palisades Fire, that could put another 100 fire engines on the road to help with those large conflagrations. So we developed the paper. We using FDAC's lobbyist in Sacramento. The white paper was sent in February to every member of the state assembly, state senate, and the governor's office. To date, I've been asked to be part of the outreach in regards to the white paper. There's a core group of us that have been meeting. To date, we have had virtual meetings with the deputy cabinet member for the governor's office for emergency management. We've met with staff from the Speaker of the Assembly's office, and just this morning we met with staff from the Senate Pro Tem's office to discuss this item. We still have a lot of work to do. This was obviously a pretty significant topic at our recent fire district conference in Napa, and the reason to bring this forward to you is if you have the opportunity, you run across some of our state elected officials, and the white paper is included in your board packet as well as it's been sent out to you earlier. If you could just put a bug in their ear that the fire districts of California do need some help with state funding to help make up some of the financial losses that we've experienced over the last several decades due to decisions that were made at Sacramento and not local decisions that have affected our revenues and our ability to continue to provide the services and quite honestly, the increased services that we are being asked by our community to do each and every year. I mean, I think the 3 annual reports I presented to the board in my tenure here, each year we're seeing an increase in our call volume or our service demand from our constituents. So the public is up and down the state asking more and more of their fire districts every day because we do so much now in the emergency service realm. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions that the board may have regarding this matter.
Thank you, Chief, for that presentation. Any clarifying questions? Vice Chair.
Just to, thank you for the report and to reaffirm that I'm there for you if you need any help, because I do think the financial conditions of cities and fire districts are constantly kind of under attack. And a lot of the issues you raised or the white paper raises apply to cities as well. Just, different examples, but the same principles.
Absolutely.
So I'm glad FDAC is doing this, and whatever we can do to help, just let us know.
Appreciate
Thank you.
Any other questions? None? At this time, I'll open up to public comment for items of number 5, if there's any. Beth? No? And nothing online?
No, Chair.
I'd like to close public comment for item number 5 and return to the board for any additional statements or questions. And this is just a receive and file, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Moving on to business item number 6, the fire engine update. Chief?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. It'll take a moment to why we get the PowerPoint spooled up, but the board may recall, I think it was August of 2022, the board authorized the fire district to purchase 2 new fire engines for us. Obviously, that quite a few days, months, and a couple years have passed since we placed that order, and I'm happy to report to the board tonight that the engines have made it into production. And this PowerPoint will just illustrate kind of the updates that we're receiving from the manufacturer as these engines are being built. The first one is obviously of the cab, and fire engines are a little bit different than your standard automobile. Most fire engines are essentially custom built to meet the needs of each individual jurisdiction that orders them. So that is one of the reasons why there is a bit of a time lag. But as you can see, there's not a lot of pre-assembled parts that go into a fire engine. So the next slide, please. This is the engine compartment. Next slide. The body, and this is, I can't give enough credit to our apparatus committee. Our members did a really good job designing the fire engine for not only the needs of today, but knowing that we're going to keep these engines in service for a considerable amount of time. I put a lot of effort into thinking about what the potentiality for service demands, equipment needs are going to be in the future, and really tried to ensure that there was no stone left unturned during the design of these engines. In fact, I'm dating myself a little bit, but if you go back to the previous slide, been involved in several engine builds, and this is one of the first times in my career where we're actually putting electrical outlets in the engine compartments so that our battery-operated extrication equipment, Lucas devices, and everything can actually maintain and be charged while it's sitting in the fire engine versus having to take it out, put it on the workbench, plug it in, and then remember to grab it when you get a call. So really, again, I can't give the apparatus committee enough credit for the forethought they put through the design. Next slide. This is really the meat and potatoes of the fire engine. This is where the pump, so these are 1,500 gallon a minute pumps. This is really kind of the bread and butter of a fire engine. This is how we get water in and water out of a fire engine when we need it on a fire. Cab and chassis, so the chassis was one of the things that was pre-built. That is before the fire engine gets put on it. Next slide. Pump assembly again. Next slide. And then the painting of the cab. And this is really where the fire engine really starts to take shape, and you can really start visualizing what it's going to look like. Next slide. Again, the chassis. A lot of electrical wiring. I don't know how many miles of electrical wiring are involved in a fire engine nowadays, but much more than it was even 10 years ago. Next slide. Again, the fire engine's really starting to take shape now with being painted, and you can really start to see the cab sitting on the chassis. Next slide. This is just showing the inside of the cab where the crews have designed the cab to not only be ergonomically good for them so that they can reduce workplace injuries, but also a lot of places where other equipment, medical supplies and so forth are stored. Next slide. And there we start seeing the body of the fire engine. Keep going. And so in closing, this is our current engine 11. I am happy to report that our final inspection has been scheduled now for the first part of June. So typically after the apparatus committee will go back, they will spend 2 days at the factory. They'll go through the apparatus with a fine tooth comb, make sure everything is built to the spec. There's no issues. They will pump test it, road test it. And then after that, we're hoping maybe a month to month and a half, the engine will hopefully be here in American Canyon, depending on how much is on the punch list, of course, right? And then we can start training our crews, get them trained on the apparatus before we put them in service. So it's been a long ride for us because of the order, but that is really just what it is at this point. Apparatus orders are even gone past 2 years now. So just thought this was a good opportunity to share with the board that their investment that they made in the fire district and our emergency response capabilities is starting to come to fruition. And we're no longer looking at drawings of fire engines. We're actually looking at metal, rubber, and the actual fire apparatus itself. So with that, happy to answer any questions that any of the board may have.
Yeah, thank you for that presentation, and I actually like the slides to show how it gets from one end to the next being created. Battery-wise, how many batteries are on an engine like this?
Ooh, I can't. Significantly less if it was an electric fire engine. I think there's about 6. Yeah, 3 and 3. Yeah.
Okay, and is there a generator on there as well, or there's no need for a generator? No? Oh, okay. Thank you. Board Member Cruz.
There's a portable generator we use for running gas-operated equipment, but the way the station's designed, there's a power cord that we plug the engine into when it's not being used that helps keep the battery charged. It's
Okay.
essentially a trickle charger.
Yeah, okay, gotcha. Board Member Cruz?
Yeah, Chief, I got a couple of questions. So I take it it's being manufactured in Wisconsin. And what are the lifespans of these fire trucks typically?
Well, we have 2 apparatus right now that are 2005 models. They're our reserve engines, so we've gotten about 20 years out of them. Typically, a good rule of thumb is you keep them in frontline service, so responding to calls on the daily, about 8 to 10 years. And then you usually put them into reserve status, so if your frontline engine goes down, you have another engine to get into them. Typically, you can get another 10 years out of that. So it's not unrealistic to get about 20 years out of an engine. And we do that because they are such a significant financial investment.
Great. Where will it be housed? Will it be at Donaldson or the?
So we ordered 2 so that each station will have a new frontline engine. And then we will have, really for the first time in American Canyon, since I've been here especially, we'll have a reserve engine at each fire station as well, so that if one of the engines goes down, we have the ability to jump into the other engine, or if we have a significant incident, need to call our personnel back, they have another engine to jump on to be able to either go to the emergency or run any calls for service while the other engines are committed.
Awesome. Last question. Who will have the honor to drive it back from Wisconsin? Will that be you or Cliff or both?
No, that,
Just kidding.
you know, I've always wanted to take a road trip, but I can tell you, I don't think a road trip in a fire engine would be the most enjoyable. Typically, the manufacturing company has a series of drivers that they will hire, and it's included in the purchase price. They will actually drive it back from the factory. They will take it to Golden State, which is our local Pierce representative in Sacramento. They will do another once through with it after it's been driven. They use the transport from Appleton to California, wherever it may be, with the exception of Hawaii, because they have to take a boat. But they use that as another road test to make sure that the vehicles are 100% worthy before we take delivery of them and put them in service.
Awesome. Thanks, Chief.
Vice Chair?
When you talked about having 2 new ones, does that mean our next one is in queue or? 'Cause
No, we ordered, the pictures
Yeah.
only show one engine, but remember, we ordered 2 engines identical.
Oh,
So both of them are being built simultaneously.
okay.
It would have been redundant to show you slides of each engine because
Oh,
they are literally
right.
identical twins.
okay. I thought they were being built one at a time, so good.
No, they're both being built simultaneously on the assembly floor. So when our apparatus committee goes back for the final inspection, they will have both engines side by side for them to go through.
Okay, well, it's exciting to have 2 brand-new engines. We should have a party or something.
At this time, I'd like to open up to public comment if there's any.
Yes, good evening, Beth Marcus. Thank you for that slide. It's very interesting and educational to see how the fire trucks are actually being built. But I love the front end of it. I love the fact that the flag is right on the grill.
That's our current fire engine. Our new engines won't have the flag.
Oh, okay, well, I tell you, I'm like a kid in the candy store when I see the fire trucks anywhere. At the store, I get all excited. Oh my gosh, my guys are inside, you know. I get so excited to see the trucks wherever they're at. I get very emotional when I think about the fire department or police department because you guys do such an outstanding job. But I love the look of that fire truck, and I can't wait for it to come out and maybe do some ride-alongs.
Thank you, Beth. Seeing that there's no other public comment, I'd like to close public comment on item number 6, return to the board for any additional statements, questions, and this is also a read and file, correct? No questions? Okay. We're now at the fire chief's oral reports, if there's any additional oral reports.
Just a couple, and I'll make it brief. Would like to highlight that last month, as part of our Explorer program, which is our program for essentially high school age kids that are interested in the fire service as a potential career, and it's a partnership with Boy Scouts of America. We sent 3 of our explorers as well as 2 of our advisors to Nevada for what was the first, I'm told, the first Explorer Academy post-COVID. So it was a week long, and it's an opportunity where our explorers get to actually participate in live fire burns, extrication where they're using the jaws of life, cutting cars. It's really a great program, week long. The students or the explorers are really immersed. They run it almost like a fire academy, but we're happy to support our Explorer program and send some of our explorers to that academy. Everything I heard from our advisors that went it was an amazing experience for our young explorers and really helped to really invigorate them on a potential career in the fire service. So I think that was something that was a great opportunity that we were able to capitalize on.
I'm assuming that we'll see pictures in the newsletter.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I think some were shared on social as well. So today was the second day of a several-day course where we're getting some of our personnel certified and trained on our boat that we received. This is a state fire marshal required curriculum, and they've spent the last 2 days, they have one more day out in the river, working on getting certified in their boat operations course. And I think today they were doing obstacle courses and some different things on boat maneuvering. So that program is continuing to move well. And then just in closing, appreciate Board Member Cruz and Board Member Oro attending the Fire Districts Conference in Napa last month. I think that was the most well-attended Fire Districts Conference to date. A lot of good information was shared, a lot of presentations. I had an opportunity to present on a couple topics, and then I was also elected as the vice president of the Fire Districts Association by the board members. So happy to share that as well as my role with the Joint Legislative Subcommittee. And with that, I'm getting the hook. So I will close my chief's report, and if you have any additional questions, I'd be happy to answer those as well. Thank you.
Congratulations on your appointment to the vice, so, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any future agenda items from the board? Seeing none, we have concluded our business for this evening, and we are adjourned. Good night, American Canyon.